We're getting to the back end of the 2022 season now, with the F1 circus heading back to the States for the US Grand Prix, where everything is bigger. The glitz, the glamour, and the people. And yes, I can reuse that joke since no one watched the Logan Sargent video. I'll get money if you do though, so please actually do that. That'd be great, thanks. If you're still here, then hey there guys, I'm Will, welcome to FP1 and the comedy review. The series clinging to life like Antonio Giovinazzi is clinging to that Haas F1 seat right now. The Circuit of the Americas would play host to round 19 of the season, which does in fact continue after the championship is won. Yes, this tweet is sadly real. Anyway, before we dive into things, this is usually the point where I remind you that if you end up enjoying the comedy review, don't forget to drop it a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I'm trying to hit 60,000 subscribers by the end of the year, and you clicking that big red button means I need to make one less alternate account to make that happen. Now that's out the way, let's get into the comedy review. It's the US Grand Prix.
We are a fucking bunch of wankos.
So let's begin with the news, and I think it's customary at this point to update you all on the cost cap scandal. Before the race in Japan, there were rumours Red Bull had broken the cost cap for 2021. The team were adamant then that they had complied with the regulations and any murmurings in the paddock were completely unfounded. However, once the race came to a close, their story changed a bit. You see, as it turns out, Red Bull actually had a different interpretation of the budget cap. I wonder where this is going. Sure enough, it was revealed that the team, along with Aston Martin and Williams, had fallen foul of the regulations, and as everyone tried to piece together what the flying Lawrence Stroll spent all his money on, Abu Dhabi 2021 began trending on Twitter again. At time of recording, we still don't know exactly what will happen to Red Bull, but I'll be honest, if they lose their championship from last year, I'll record an episode of the comedy review while taking a I guess we'll just have to wait and see how this one pans out, but I'm sure whatever happens, people will find a way to disagree with it. They usually do. The other big piece of news regarded the F1 race director. Geez, we really are going back to 2021, aren't we? Following the 1000 IQ decision to allow a tractor to take part in the Grand Prix last time out, the FIA turned around this weekend and admitted they might just have made a mistake. Thankfully, they had made the clever decision at the start of the year to hire 2 race directors for 2022. So, when one inevitably f***ed up, they at least had a replacement ready and raring to go. Eduardo Freitas will no longer direct the Grand Prix for the remainder of the year, and as we wondered whether we'd been too harsh on poor Michael Massey, FP1 was getting underway at Austin. Now you may notice that a few new faces were in the paddock this weekend, as 5 drivers were subbing in during the first practice session. You had 2021 IndyCar champ Alex Palou at McLaren, who straight away was far enough behind Norris to be on par with Daniel Ricciardo. Then you had Israeli driver Robert Schwartzman, who lost part of his session with Ferrari when the team couldn't even fit his seat right. Logan Sargent was in for Williams, who I covered in the video the other day, so please watch that. Teo Porcher in for Alpha, who didn't really do much, before we finally come to Jesus at Haas, who decided to bless Mick Schumacher when he threw his car and his F1 return hopes into the wall just 10 minutes into the session. Besides that, it was a fairly quiet opening hour, Sainz ending it fastest ahead of Verstappen and Hamilton, and that brings us on to FP2, which was even more irrelevant. After the washout at Suzuka, second practice turned into a 90-minute session testing Pirelli's new tyres for 2023. I'm gonna be completely honest with you here, nothing really happened whatsoever, and it was so late at night I actually fell asleep at my desk trying to get through it. So let's just move on to Saturday's action, shall we? FP3 would see some more representative running, and Max Verstappen would top the session ahead of Charles Leclerc. The Monegasque would join Sergio Perez and Zhou Guanyu in the penalty crew this weekend, which means I can already tell you which driver will win the race on Sunday. One driver who definitely won't be would be Mick Schumacher, and his Haas opted to revert to 2021 spec in third practice, leaving him out for most of the hour. Another with issues was Daniel Ricciardo, and not just with his pace. And just saying, as a Danny Rick fan, my excuse this week is Palou was warned about destroying the brakes, so clearly this is all his fault. Before we go into qualifying, the sad news hit the paddock that Red Bull owner Diedrich Mateschitz had passed away at the age of 78. Anyway, Ricciardo would continue to be in quali as he failed to make it out of Q1, and at this point I wonder if he'd been quicker just taking that horse around COTA as opposed to the MCL 36. The other shock exit of the session would be Nicholas Latifi. No, I'm kidding. It was Esteban Ocon, and Mick Schumacher would also find himself out when he seemed to think he was doing a demo run for the fans at turn 1. Q2 would be a good session if you happen to be one of the 3 Alfa Romeo supporters out there, Bottas and Zhou making it into the top 10. That was until the Chinese driver was caught falling foul of the track limits at turn 11, and since he wasn't a Red Bull driver, it was back to the drop zone for him. So it was on to the final part of qualifying then, and with Leclerc taking his penalty, it all looked set for a Max Verstappen pole. But the Monegasque wasn't going to go down without a fight, and neither were Mercedes. Or at least one of them. Hamilton slotted his car up into P3 ahead of the Red Bulls, but George Russell was seeking advice from his predecessor, as his first run left him down in P9 behind Bottas. He would improve to P6 by the end of Q3, but the real shock was Carlos Sainz, who managed to snatch pole away while no one was looking, leaving us all to wonder the same thing. Where the did that come from? So once penalties were applied, it would be a Sainz Verstappen front row, with the Mercs then in hot pursuit, but what would happen come race day? Well, you likely already know, but let's find out anyway. It would be a great start off the line for Max Verstappen, though for Carlos Sainz, not so much. The Spaniard would get wheel spin off the line, then encounter a wild George Russell going into turn 1, the Briton handing Carlos a puncture and scaring his car so much it pissed itself, the water leak putting him out of the Grand Prix entirely. It was actually a fairly chaotic opening lap, Sergio Perez preparing for a future in Formula E with the way he passed Valtteri Bottas. This move would cause damage to the Red Bull driver's front wing, with everyone expecting the FIA to throw out the meatball flag to force the team to change it. But then you've got to remember that the FIA and consistency get on about as well as Russia and Ukraine right now. As that flew off and Latifi was doing Latifi things at the back of the pack, Max Verstappen was starting to build out a lead ahead of Lewis Hamilton. The lone remaining Ferrari of Leclerc, meanwhile, was stuck in the mid-pack, just relying on a safety car to bring themselves back into contention. How convenient then that Ferrari-powered driver Valtteri Bottas would spin into the gravel and bring out the yellow they needed. Oh, wait, sorry, we can't call this a conspiracy because it's not Red Bull shit, my bad. Hamilton was also allowed to close up to Verstappen here, but let's be honest, on the restart there was absolutely no hope in him getting through. What I want to focus on instead is a segment that I've not been able to use for a very, very long time. Because it's Aston Watch.
What are we doing? Racing or ping pong?
So Aston Martin were actually having a pretty good race for once. After the turn 1 melee, Stroll somehow found himself in P3, with Vettel making a solid start as well. They would obviously drop back, because they're Astons after all, but the timing of the safety car allowed them to keep hold of 6th and 7th for a little while longer. But you should know by now I don't use this segment to praise teams. I use it when someone is about to do something incredibly stupid, and that honour would go to Lance Stroll on lap 22, the Canadian welcoming Fernando Alonso to the team early as he gave the Spaniard a close-up view of the AMR 22. As Stroll turned his F1 car into a green fidget spinner, the Alpine was sent skyward and into the inside barrier, though through some utter miracle was in a fit shape to continue. That maybe couldn't be said about Stroll's car. The Canadian and his 3 brain cells concluded that the accident was in no way his fault. Thankfully, the FIA finally decided to be competent as they deemed otherwise. The safety car was out again, however, and with Ferrari now back in the race, Leclerc made short work of Perez as he moved into 3rd. Hamilton would then pit for the hard tyres, hoping to get the undercut on Verstappen ahead, though this would rely on one of 2 things happening: Max slowing down or Red Bull cocking up a pit stop. And let's be honest, neither of those are... Oh. Okay then. Somehow, Sebastian Vettel was now in the lead, though Lewis was able to quickly dispatch the German as he looked on for his first victory of the season, provided Max wasn't able to catch back up. Team LH would look on powerless, however, as the Dutchman closed in the gap over the final few laps, making the move for the lead with just 6 to go. And that's where he'd stay until the checkered flag. Those that weren't still in floods of pathetic tears were treated to Vettel making his way back through the pack on much fresher tyres, making easy work of Albon and then Magnussen through the final few corners to take P8. and we won't talk about anyone further down for obvious reasons. I should also mention here that Haas weren't particularly happy with the FIA after the Grand Prix, with the meatball flag only handed out this year when carbon fibre seemingly draped off one of their cars. The easy fix might have been to tell Kevin to not hit so many people, but the team's protest was partly a success, Fernando Alonso getting a 30-second time penalty, dropping him out of the points. Still though, I'm pretty happy with the weekend on a whole. An entertaining race, and not the Verstappen lights the flag victory I think a lot of us feared going into it. Red Bull are Constructors' champions, and on a poignant weekend for them, well done for that. And Ferrari, well, better luck next year. I'm sure one of these days you'll finally get it right. If you enjoyed the comedy review though, be sure to drop it a like and get subscribed for more content in the coming weeks. I know it was out a little later than usual, and sadly that might be the case for the next couple of races as well. But I've got some really exciting videos planned for later this week, so you can stay tuned for those. A huge thanks as always to my patrons for their support as well. And if you want to help support me and the channel, all the links to that and my other socials are down in the description below. Anyway, that's all from me, so I'll see you soon with another video, but until then, have a good one.